Hey, everybody. Welcome to Grilling at the Green. I'm JT. How is your golf this week? And depending on what part of the country you live in, you either got to play some or you didn't. Weather indicative this time of year, of course. We'd like to thank the folks at Painted Hills Natural Beef and the Oregon Crab Commission for being great supporters of this show. Well, I'm really happy to welcome my guest today, Mark Wagner. Mark's got a new book, Native Links: The Surprising History of Our First People in Golf. First of all, Mark, welcome. Nice job on the book, by the way.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What?
thank you so much for reaching out, Jeff. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to our conversation.
Yeah, it's all good. Uh, I guess the first obvious question is, what prompted you to write this and to research it and write it? There's a lot of
Yeah,
research in this book, so
yeah, there is. Yeah, that's my wheelhouse, writing and research. Being a 12 handicapper, I'm not making any money in golf, but I do some writing for Golf Course Architecture, a magazine that's published. It's a global magazine, but it's published in Britain
yeah,
by Tudor Rose. And about 2 years ago, I was interviewing Rhys Jones, well-known architect, the son of Robert Trent Jones Sr., brother to RTJ2, as they call him. And those guys have done a lot of work for the native tribes, by the way. But I was interviewing him about Lake of Isles, which is a two courses. It's actually 36 holes, north and south, down in the Mashantucket Pequot Reservation in Connecticut. Some people recognize Mashantucket Pequots as one of the more successful gaming tribes. They have Foxwoods, which is I think it is the most successful casino, not only in the country. I think it's one of the more successful casinos in the world, drawing on that New York, New York, Boston corridor there. I'm interviewing Rhys Jones, and I'm interviewing the historian for the Mashantucket Pequots, a woman by the name of Lori Potter. And I wrote up that article. That article is available online at Golf Course Architecture. And I said to myself, this is about 2 years ago, Jeff. I said, well, this is kind of interesting. I'm like, how many native tribes own golf courses, And
yeah.
sure enough, I started doing some research, and now it's 70 tribes around the country own and operate golf courses, and mostly that is because of gaming. Mostly that is in the post 1988 period. Right in
Right.
1988, Ronald Reagan signed into law the Gaming Act, which Congress had passed, and since that time, 70 or so, excuse me, tribes have gone into golf, and so that began the project. I started researching that. As I mentioned, Rhys Jones designed 3 courses for native tribes. He worked with the Lakota Sioux, among others. And then his brother, Robert Trent Jones, did a lot of work for the Seneca tribe in New York, the Mohawk tribe. And also, he did one of the first native-owned courses, uh, Cochiti Pueblo, out there in New Mexico. And there's a wonderful interview, I think, with Robert Trent Jones Jr. about his work with Cochiti. And so that's where it began. And then I started looking into, well, of course, the next obvious question is, well, how many native players have there been, in the history of
Right.
golf, going back to whatever 1890 in our country. And sure enough, I turned up some, as you say, some research about native players along the way too.
Yeah, they did. In fact, I'm going to talk about a few of those or ask you to talk about them a little later in the show. But I found that really interesting. And also, you're talking about golf courses. We have a number. I live in Oregon, as most people know. We have a number of them out here: Wild Horse, Canita, Chinook Winds, Oregon Dune or Ocean Dunes, excuse me, like that. And I've noticed that in the last, say, 10 to 15 years, that the tribes have, if they've got a casino, exactly what you were talking about, Mark. But now some of the other tribes that are looking into building courses adjacent to the casinos or relatively close, that they already have the land for and stuff. To me,
Mm.
it's a natural mesh for them to do that. And I find that kind of fascinating that that they actually, I mean, it's a monetary thing. They want to make money and business in that, but it's also kind of a natural addition to what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. And the last third of Native Links, my book, by the way, I think you know, is a glossary of all the native owned courses.
Right.
So that might be my next project, by the way. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that as we go, but I'd love to go around and play them all and do a little essay on not only the courses, but the tribes, the tribal histories and so on, and meet some of the people involved. But um that's for another day. But yeah, no, they with the gaming, with the casinos, they've been able to hire the best. You know, they've hired Reese Jones, his brother, RTJ2. They've hired Bill Core and Ben Crenshaw. You know, those guys are at the top of their game. They're doing artwork, you know, as far as
Yeah.
golf courses. They did Wiko Pa, they did Talking Stick. They've hired Jeff Brower. The list goes on. You know, they're hiring Pete Nalestai. Pete Nalestai's daughter has worked with the tribes up in Washington. I think it was I'm gonna Salish, maybe is the name of the course. Um, so it's really, you know, it's just a fascinating story, you know, and
Yeah.
not, I want to also mention that not only the casinos and golf, which as you point out is kind of a natural fit, the revenues have also enabled them to build archives and museums. Some of them are now going into their own schools and language programs. So in terms of Native history, you know, it's a win-win in many respects. That the recovery, you know, it's fueled by gaming, but you know, a lot of the tribes want to kind of branch out from that and create other economic endeavors. You look at Santa Ana Pueblo, which holds the Native American Open each year, which I just was at just a couple weeks ago. You know, they have a Tesla dealership, they have a school, they have a retail mall, they have gas stations, they have you know, so it's not only golf. You know, they
Yes.
have I think it's 5 corporations, Santa Ana, where the the revenues are from gaming have been driving economic recovery for the tribes. And you know, we all know that history, it's a dark moment in terms of American history that you know, I love celebrating their recovery. I love celebrating the fact that they're still here, as the natives like to say, and we can take part in that recovery, supporting these things, playing those courses, and being aware of it. Just being aware that this is happening and it's a good thing.
Yeah, it really is, and I say more power to them. Um, I think as excuse me, as you were just describing, I think in a very short order, and some of it with the help of your book, they will start to think of them as more destination resorts with
Mhm.
these golf courses and the malls and the restaurants and theaters and so on and so forth. They will think of them more that way than just there's another Indian casino. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I've run into that, you know, that you use that phrase Indian casino, which, you know, I think some people can use as a pejorative, a
right.
kind of a negative term. But let's keep in mind, you know, that we're all part of this, you know, and one of the arguments in my book is that we're all mixed, right? We all have different bloodlines coming from different places, and there's no reason why we can't celebrate that recovery, even if it, you know, even if in some, you know, whatever, in
Yeah.
some viewpoints, gaming is you know, it might encourage some small part of the population to, you know, fall to habits and so on. I'll point out one thing: Thornberry, up in Oneida territory, right? They have a relationship now with the LPGA. So
Yes.
it's not only destination resorts that you mentioned, but Circling Raven up in Idaho has hosted the LPGA. Thornberry is the home course of the Green Bay Packers, right? And in fact, that's part of their insignia is that big G. So these partnerships are growing. It's recent history, you and I are old enough to say, well, 1990 is not that long ago,
Not that long ago.
Um,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
so yeah, I just am really happy. I feel lucky and blessed to be able to have told this story and to be out there building relationships because it was almost 100% the native people when I tell them what I'm up to are welcoming and they want their stories told. It's not it's not offensive in any way that I come out there, a white guy
Sure.
from New Jersey, and say, "Hey, let me tell you a story." They've really liked it, they've appreciated it, and I've built some really nice friendships along the way.
I bet. Yeah. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back with Mark Wagner, Dr. Mark Wagner, by the way. His new book, Native Links: The Surprising History of our First Peoples in Golf. We're going to be back in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to Grilling at the Green. I'm JT. Today we've got Mark Wagner, who has a PhD, by the way. And we're talking about his new book, Native Links: The Surprising History of Our First People in Golf. It's a great book. There's a lot of history in it. And in just a second, I'm going to ask him about uh, several of the people that he featured in the book. But first, this is every show where we do a travel tip. And I sent Mark an email on this yesterday, said, don't be surprised. Uh, but when you go and research a book like this, you've traveled some. So, what's your best travel tip for golfers, whether they're writing a book or just going to play?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. I'm a golfer myself. I love golf. I love traveling and having a destination in mind to just go and play. And one of the surprising discoveries for me was I was out in quote unquote Indian country, which is also, golf country, like
Right.
Scottsdale, Arizona, Poston Butte, Arizona, and I drove down the John Wayne Highway south of Phoenix to Ak Chin Reservation, AK-CHIN. And that's not far from Phoenix. If you're in Phoenix, you can get down there in about 45 minutes. And oh my, Jeff, that was one of the finest courses I've ever set foot on. Just so beautiful. Designed by uh, Steve Curley down there. It was originally designed. It's kind of an interesting history I go into in the book. It was designed originally as a exclusive club. It was going to be a club for the athletes from LA. John Daly was involved. Charles Barkley was involved. It was going to
Sure.
be kind of a bohemian type club, and it didn't work out. And so, with the help of a fee to trust program, the Ak-Chin Reservation, the Ak-Chin Tribal Council purchased it. So it is now and it hosts the Copper Cup, which is a big deal, collegiate cup between ASU and University of Arizona. They're doing all kinds of youth programs and reservation programs, and I have to say, because of that unique history, oh, when I got down there, just absolutely stunning golf course. I put it on your list, everybody. Ak-Chin, and
I
they have
will.
great practice facilities. They have night golf, by the way. They put in some courses. They have a short course you can play at night when it's really hot. And yeah, that's my travel tip for y'all.
There you go. I used to live in Arizona when I was going to college, and even though I went to school in LA, and it does get warm there. Okay, I want to talk about three of the people you featured in the book. We'll just kind of start at the front. I don't want to go over all of them because then people wouldn't have a reason to read the book. But Oscar Bunn, um,
Mm.
and very interesting story. And then, of course, tied up with, and is it Haven Meyer? Is that the way you pronounce the guy's name? Haven
Oh,
Meyer?
Havemeyer. Yeah. Theodore
Havenmeyer's.
Havemeyer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So I wanted you to kind of shed a little light. I don't want you to give too much away to the listeners, but I want you to shed a little light on that because that kind of sets the tone in my mind for the rest of the book.
Yeah, it's really a great story. Theodore Havemeyer was involved in the founding of the USGA and that
Hmm.
initial five-course um, league, effectively, that started the U.S. Open. That included Newport, Chicago, Shinnecock Hills out in eastern Long Island. And Havemeyer and his brother were they kind of cornered the sugar market. They were very big and I think that was like the origin of Domino Sugar, which I think is still kind of a monopoly. But
Yeah.
anyway, Havemeyer was the head of the USGA, and the second US Open was played at Shinnecock Hills. Now, Shinnecock Hills is built on the highland in eastern Long Island, absolutely beautiful site between Shinnecock Bay and Peconic Bay. And it was drawing all the big names from New York, Ford, Vanderbilt, Roosevelt, Havemeyer, Bingham, Morris, the list goes on. But the Shinnecock were the ones that actually built the course. They were the labor for the course.
Right.
And one of them was a gifted golfer. So he not only helped build the course and he became a club maker, but his name was Oscar Smith Bunn. And he represented Shinnecock at two of the early US Opens, 1896 and 1899. And the story you're referring to was actually, some people will on your program will know the name John Shippen,
Sure.
less so Oscar Bunn. But at that second US Open, 1896, John Shippen and Oscar Bunn, a black man and a brown man, were representing Shinnecock Hills. And when the Scots and the British arrived, they're thinking, they're gonna take home the trophy. In fact, it wasn't for a few years before an American won it. And they said, well, we're not going to play if a black man and a brown man are representing Shinnecock. They were narrow in their view, and I guess maybe they're probably a little afraid too. But anyway, Havemeyer said, okay, you don't have to play. I'm just going to send Oscar and John Shippen out by themselves, and they'll go 1 and 2, right? So pick
Yeah.
up your irons or go home, right? And sure enough, he stood them down. It's a great story. I think it speaks to the best of our, the better angels of golf's nature, right? Havemeyer
Right.
said, look, it's not about race, it's not about religion, it's about who can play golf, who's the better golfer. And in fact, Shippen, it's a famous story that I recount in the book. Shippen came in fifth, but would have won it except for he got an 11 on, I think it's hole number, because he was leading. He was tied for the lead. And except for that 11, he probably would have won that second US Open. He went on to play, I think, 5 US Opens and was a golf pro his whole life. Oscar went on, set course records in Connecticut, course records in Florida, taught in the Adirondacks. Really interesting character. And I'll go one step further. I have to say the USGA really likes my project and have been very supportive. And so I met Oscar's family, and he still has family on the reservation. One of them
Oh,
is a
cool.
fine artist by the name of David Bunn Martine. And so we put a call together with some folks at the USGA, and I said, hey, don't you guys need a portrait of Oscar Bunn in the World Golf Hall of Fame? And they're like, yeah, we'll do that. And so now David painted it. And so I went down and presented in Pinehurst at the Hall of Fame August 17th this year, when the book rolled out, and I walked in and there was the portrait of Oscar Bunn right there in the Hall of Fame. I was so moved. I have to say, I was like, first of all, it's a beautiful painting, and secondly, this is kind of it's overdue that Oscar Bunn
Oh,
gets his,
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Absolutely. Mark, we're going to take another quick break. We'll be back. We're going to be back and talk more about Mark's book, Native Links, The Surprising History of Our First People of Golf. And it's a great book. I recommend it. But we're going to come back and talk more about that in just a minute. See, this show starts as a radio show, then gets converted to a podcast. That's why I take these breaks like that. Um,
no worries.
okay, here we go.
Question.
Welcome back to Grilling at the Green. I'm JT. We want to thank the folks at Painted Hills Natural Beef. Also, a new sponsor that's been with us just for a while here, Squares Golf Shoes. And as an older guy with funky feet, I can tell you Squares Golf Shoes has been helping me keep my feet underneath me. I'll just put it that way. But you can go to squares.com and find out more about those. And also the folks at Grilly Grill. So we're talking with Mark Wagner about his new book, Native Links. And another person, well, you got a couple of, but one one person in particular, I think, Mark, that people who are into golf and have watched golf and stuff, the Sarge, Orville Moody. Um,
Mm,
I'm kind of skipping ahead here a little bit, but he was a tremendous golfer.
hmm.
Um, and I'm not sure that when people were watching him, pardon me, on television, that they knew anything about his Native American connections, history, family, anything like that. I don't think they knew that.
Yeah, I've talked at length with a number of his family. Spanky Moody, Junior Moody are still in the golf business out there in Lawton, Oklahoma.
Right.
But then famously, he took his daughter Michelle as his caddy. And I spoke with her. Her son is an outstanding golfer now in the collegiate ranks, by the way. I think he's at LSU. Michelle Moody Blackman is her married name. She was a great help in the book. And that's a fascinating story. They're all enrolled in the Choctaw Nation, and they're very proud of that. And in fact, Orville Moody's mother walked on the Trail of Tears, his mother, Sarah. And so he honed his skills in the Army, and that's why he was referred to as Sarge. It's
Sarge.
a great
Right.
story because he was in Korea during the Korean War and where my father was, by the way. And a general took a liking to Orville Moody because he was such a good golfer. And so he won the Korean Open, I think, 3 times. There's a story in the book where Lee Trevino goes over and says, play for the morale of the troops. And he walks in and says, all right, I want to play your best golfer. And so they send Sarge out, Orville Moody, and sure enough, he beats Trevino. They become lifelong friends. And Trevino said a number of times, I go over this in the book, Native Links, that if Orville Moody could putt, he would have been known like Nicholas and Palmer, that he was such a great ball striker. And all of his family said the same thing,
Yeah.
that he was a great, great shot maker, but he had the yips. And so he he takes Michelle as his caddy to help him read the greens, and he goes on a tear, right? Particularly
Right.
on the senior tour. But I recount how in 1969, after 14 years in the Army, Sarge wins the 69th U.S. Open in 1969. And yes, you're right. The media didn't cover his native background for a lot of different reasons, right? But the Choctaw Nation held like a week-long party for him, named him Indian of the Year, and his mother rode in a Cadillac convertible. He
Right.
got an eagle headdress. And Michelle said he hung the eagle headdress in his house. He was very proud of it for many years. Now I go over this in the book. It's a fun story. He couldn't be there for the parade, but he came back for the party and spent the night dancing with the Choctaw Nation after he won that U.S. Open. And then with Michelle on his bag and reading his putts, he goes on a tear and makes good money in on the senior tour. He wins the senior U.S. Open, I think twice
Yes.
later in the 70s. And I looked it up. He made about a $500,000 as a golfer, which in the 60s and 70s was a fair amount. Most of that came with Michelle on his bag, reading his putts, and on the senior tour. But it's a fun story, and again celebrates their heritage and which they don't shy away from at all. They're all
Oh yeah.
enrolled. They're like, yeah, we're Choctaw, 100%, and
You've got a
they were
great
all good
picture.
golfers.
Yes,
I'm
you've got a
sorry.
great picture in your book of Orville and Michelle. She's standing up behind him, holding the flag, helping him read a putt, and it's really indicative to the story. So I remember him
Yeah.
playing, and I was in the '60s. I was a kid, of course, but I remember him playing and hearing that name all the time. But I honestly, to tell you the truth, till I read your book, Mark, I didn't know that he was part of one of the Indian nations back there. I didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun. It's a fun story. And again, the family, like all the natives that I've met along the way researching this book, they're all like, yeah, let's tell this story because it's a part of who they were and
Yeah.
still a part of who they are. They're enrolled and they participate in the tribe and they're still also in the golf world. in fact, Spanky Moody and Junior Moody had to turn off his tractor to talk to me. He's still out there gang mowing, and they said that Orville had a brother who might have been even better than Orville. Lloyd Moody could shoot both left and right-handed. They
Oh,
said
wow.
he could shoot par from the left and right side. Now Orville Moody, he had the army behind him, and that's a story that's a thread in the book that, to get off the res, the army was a way out, right? Which
Right.
I'm making the argument in some ways that now golf is a way out, right? And in fact,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
cover a number of female golfers who have become PGA members, uh, teaching pros. Not everybody is going to be as good as Orville Moody and win, get into that elite group, but there's a lot of jobs in golf. There's a lot of support in golf from the PGA, from the USGA. We need these people. We need particularly women and women of color to get up there and become teaching pros and all. So, yeah, it's a feel good story all around.
Little side note here for you, Mark. My father-in-law, he's no longer with us. He was raised on the reservation up on the northeastern corner of Oklahoma and Arkansas. And
Hmm.
then he went in the army. And he was
Hmm.
only 16, but he served in Korea and then he came back and he always loved to play golf. Now, he wasn't a tour quality or pro quality, but it's just kind of a sidebar story there I find fascinating. So he was
Yeah, no, that's right around there is where the Moody's were from Lawton. He made his home in the end in Texas, but yeah, it's really kind of something that surprised me all along the way is how golf's been a part of their history,
yeah,
even before, gaming. There's a
yeah.
lot of great athletes. I mentioned Jim Thorpe. He played golf. He wanted to teach golf at the end of his life, and so we've uncovered a lot of stories that are worth telling.
Yeah, absolutely. And another one, and again, this is in the Oklahoma area, Jimmy Squire. Uh, Jimmy is an adaptive golfer, and
Hmm.
yet spends a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of effort helping kids and native golfers and all this stuff. And that's a pretty inspiring story. When you found, I mean, Orville Moody wasn't that hard to find. Okay, I mean, if you looked at that, I'm sure, having written a few things myself, but somebody like Jimmy Squire or Walter Hopper, how do you find those? How do you find those stories?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jeff. And again, I really appreciate being on your show, and hello to all your listeners and golfers out there. It's kind of interesting. I mean, again, I have been trained as a researcher and a writer, so
Right.
it's in my wheelhouse, so to speak. And you just put your ear to the ground. So I went to the Native American Open last year, the 2023 Native American Open, to cover it for ICT News. And when I got there, I found the executive assistant, who's running the show. She's doing everything, right? While the guys are out standing around. And
Sure.
I said, Micah, her name was Hummingbird. Her nickname was Hummingbird. I said, are there any stories that I should know out here? What should I be looking for? And she said, "Oh yeah, there's a really good adaptive golfer, amputee golfer coming named Jimmy Squire from Oklahoma." And so I sat and I waited, and sure enough, he wasn't hard to spot because he had a metal leg. And Jimmy was also, just like everybody else in my experience, very, very eager to tell his story, and because he's out there trying to help veterans and Native Americans who are struggling with physical disabilities
Mm-hmm.
to golf. Right? Why shouldn't they enjoy the golf course just like everyone else? And so Jimmy has devoted his life to this, and so we've become fast friends, Jimmy and I, and his story is just amazing. He's part of the second. He was adopted into the Jim Thorpe family by Jack Thorpe, Jim Thorpe's son, and so he's part of that Thunder clan of the Sac and Fox. But he's also part of the absentee Shawnee, and yeah, just a really inspiring story. Just
Yeah.
rather than and you can imagine you and I know, you mentioned it earlier, veterans struggle. I mean, and imagine if you come home disabled from combat,
Right.
depression, addiction, these kinds of things are big issues. And Jimmy's out there just saying, hey, golf can be a part of this. Don't sit there staring at the wall. Get out
Yeah.
there and find the
Yes.
support you need,
Yeah, absolutely. Mark and I are going to take another break, and we'll be back and wrap up the regular show, and then I'll torment him a little bit on after hours. But you're listening to Grilling at the Green on the Golf News Network on iHeart, actually, is part of it. Yeah. Welcome back to Grilling at the Green. I'm JT. Today we're talking with Mark Wagner. Mark's new book, Native Links. It's a cool book. Um, I had my own selfish reasons for reading it, and I can list them off really quick. One, I'm a golf fanatic, or I wouldn't be doing the show. Two, I have on my wife's side, I have a history with Native Americans and that, and out of Oklahoma. Eventually moved to the West Coast like that, and I like to help. As we talked at the end of the last segment, I like to help veterans a lot, and those are just three of my long list of reasons. And so I reached out to Mark, and he was gracious enough to send me a copy, and I recommend it out there. So, a couple of things I want to talk about. A couple more people before we leave. Probably the most notable Native American golfer right now is Nota Begay.
hmm
He's a commentator for Golf Channel and NBC. Uh, Probably not a lot of people heard of him until Tiger came around because they were college roommates and buddies, and I don't care how you get there. He got there, and then he got some notability out there, and a fine golfer, and he does a lot to not only help um, his family, his native nation, but kids and everything like that. I think he's an inspiring guy.
He really is. So he's seen the book. His brother Clint Begay was helpful to me. So where they hold the Native American Open is at Santa Ana Pueblo, Santa Ana Golf Club, and Twin Warriors Golf Club in New Mexico.
Right.
And that's where Nota Begay has his foundation as well. So NB3 Foundation is housed there, right at the Santa Ana Golf Club. And that's where he operates out of in all these programs that are aimed at helping Native youth and young athletes. He has the NB3 Elite Golf. He has the NB3 Golf. He has a partnership with Nike and N7. Interesting story there. But yeah, as you mentioned, he won two NCAA championships alongside Tiger Woods at Stanford. He won four times on the PGA Tour before a back injury
Yeah.
kind of settled his score for a few years. And uh, he then he sees that now as a blessing because those are the years when he started his foundation and realized he had real ability to raise money and to create networks that will create positives in our world, right? So but his golfing is not done yet. He qualified for the senior tour this year. I don't know if you followed that. He
Yes.
did play the senior open, so he's back golfing as well. His back is resolved on some level. So, but as you mentioned, he's just a charismatic guy who is a commentator. People really like his commentator. He's very clear. He comes from the background of being a professional golfer. And so,
Right.
yeah, the sky's the limit for Nota Begay. And he's, in a way, been supportive of the project. We're hoping that he writes an afterword for the next edition. And it's in his hands. As I said, he's got the book, and his brother and his friend at Nike, Sam McCracken, are also, whispering in his ear about how we can
There you go. There
uh,
you go.
forward the book. Yeah.
Mark, one last question for the regular show here. Whenever you do a book like this, there's these evil people called editors, and they make you take stuff out. I've dealt with them a few times. Was there something you really wanted to to put in the book, but you couldn't, or maybe you saved it for the next edition? Something that's really like, yeah, that's a good one.
That's a really good question. Yeah, the next book, I'm really hoping. So Back Nine Press has been really great, really supportive. The book, it's a handsome book. It's well done production wise. Jim Sitar is the editor there, and he and I have a really good rapport. He did take some things out. I had told the story of how one of the Shinnecock families who I cover in the book, actually, it's where the book begins, goes back to the great grandfather. They've been the greenskeepers there forever. And there was one named Elmer Smith, who was the father of Mike, who I interviewed. And in fact, his grandson, Matt, is now the assistant greenskeeper at Shinnecock. So it goes back all the way back to the beginning, 1894.
Right.
And Elmer Smith, Mike Smith was telling me Elmer Smith got an invitation to the wedding of Jackie O's mother. She married
Oh,
one guy who was yeah. And it was a funny story because it was a gold embossed invitation that Mike still has. And Elmer, as the groundskeeper, Shinnecock gets an invite to this, New York Society wedding at Shinnecock that was Bingham Morris the third and Jackie O's mother, who was a Beauvoir.
yes.
And I told that story thinking this is a great hook, but Jim didn't think it was like related to golf. So that's the kind of thing that I was eating up that the editor was like, nah, this has nothing to do with golf. So and I think he's probably right about that.
Oh,
I
maybe.
just thought it was a great story because well, the punchline was Elmer, I was like, well, did he go? That must have been a great night, right?
Yeah.
And Mike Smith's like, nah, he just filed that invitation. He's like, I'm not going to that. So yeah, a few other things. There was a story about Orville Moody actually that Michelle told me that demonstrated how good of a shot maker he was. Where some of this is still in the book, but they were at a pro-am and it was going slow, and there was a pelican in a tree, like 150 yards away, and Orville Moody gets angry with the bird making all that noise, and he says, "Michelle, give me my 7-iron." And she says, "No, I'm not going to give you the 7-iron. You're going to hurt the bird." And he's like, "No, I'm not going to hurt the bird. I'm going to put it between its legs." And she's like, "Okay." And she hands him his 7-iron. Sure enough, he gets a golf ball that scares the bird off without hurting
Yeah.
it. That's how good he was,
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Mark, how can people find you? How can they find the book? Besides like me
Oh yeah,
calling
good
you calling
question.
you up and saying, send me one. So
Yeah. No, I really appreciate your time, Jeff. I appreciate the support out there. As I said, I'm really happy with the book. I think it's a good read, not only for golfers, but people who are interested in history. You can get it on Amazon, Native Links, Mark Wagner, The Surprising History of Our First People in Golf. I have a website called Dr. Mark on Golf, and there's also a website called Native Links, nativelinks.net. And I'm easy to find. If you search around on the web, Mark Wagner. Um, I'm retired now from Worcester State University. And then we also like you to support the press. So if you're going to buy the book, yeah, get it from Amazon if you need to, if you got those credits, but also supporting it by going through the press. Back9press.com is helpful to an independent publisher like Jim. So
there you
it's
go.
out there. You can find us. And yeah, as I said, it's an enjoyable read. And as I said, my next book is going to be going around playing all those courses. And I'm looking for some compatriots in that project. So feel free to get in touch and say, hey, let's meet up for a round at Circling Raven or something like that.
Let me know if you head out to the West Coast, especially Oregon or Washington. I'll be your victim. Okay.
All
All right.
kinds of native owned courses up there.
There are. Anyway, we got to get out of here. We're over on our time, but Mark's going to stick around for after hours. So, again, Native Links, Mark Wagner, great book. You can find him online, and we're going to get out of here. So, as usual, go out, play some golf, have some fun, but most of all, be kind. Take care, everybody. Welcome to After Hours here on Grilling with the Grain. I'm JT. This week, our victim of choice is Mark Wagner. I don't know if they can actually see this. Yeah, they can. This is the book, Native Links, The Surprising History of the First People of Golf. Great book. It's a great resource, too, when you go in the back and look at all the, what'd you say? There was 55?
No,
55?
70.
70 courses owned by Native American families and tribes and things and nations. And it's a good thing. Mark, this is the type of show where I ask you some stuff that's probably not the most relevant to writing a book, but it's kind of fun. Okay. So
Sure.
if you're ready. All right. First question is if you could play golf and then have dinner with a historical figure, who would it be and what would be on the menu?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, living or dead?
It doesn't matter. We'll bring them back for 4 hours if you want, if they're gone.
Okay. Well, there's a bunch actually. We were talking about Orville Moody earlier. According to his family, Spanky Moody and Junior Moody, he was a great storyteller and had a great sense of humor. So I think a round with Orville Moody would have been great. I'm a good putter. I might have been able to help him with putting, and I'm not a good shot maker, so maybe he could help me with shot making. So,
There you go.
and then what would be on the menu? I think Sarge was really, from Oklahoma, really into that, that good American beef. So I think we'd have a nice steak with some cream spinach to go along with it. So steak, mashed potatoes, and cream spinach with
There you go.
some nice red wine.
Maybe you might have to have like a pecan pie or something afterwards, slice of pie or
Oh,
something
that
there.
sounds good too. I love
That
pecan pie. That's my
oh
favorite.
yeah, that's killer stuff. What's the hardest part of your job as a writer? And is it the research? Is it I know once you get to the point where you're traveling to do the interviews, traveling's not as much fun as it used to be, but it is kind of exciting getting to go someplace and do something. But other than that, what's the
Right.
hardest part of your job?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've always been, I come from a family of writers, so writing is not really hard for me. It's hard when, the hardest part is the rejection, right? So I sent the book proposal out to a number of places before it was accepted. And then I have, different articles that I've been publishing along the way. ICT News, the Boston Globe, the Golfers Journal have all been really supportive. But, at the same time, for every acceptance you get for an essay or a chapter, there's 3 or 5 rejections, right?
Right.
So I've been trying to get into the Wall Street Journal. They cover golf. And I haven't broken through there yet. So that's really kind of hard. It's hard to just take no or just be ignored over and over again. But golf, you got to be a resilient person for golf. So I guess I have some thick skin when it comes to that now, but that is the hardest part, the rejection or people not getting your point of view.
Well, what part of your job brings you the greatest happiness or joy?
Yeah, when I hear from readers, like yourself, like, hey, I really enjoyed this, I really enjoyed your book, or hey, that was a great article. I think I mentioned well, I didn't mention earlier, but I profiled a young golfer named Madeline Long, Madison Long, who is a Navajo and Coeur d'Alene golfer, gifted young golfer, and I profiled her a couple times, and I think that helped her in her college search. Over the last year, she's now a D1
Sure.
golfer at the University of Maryland. That gives me a lot of satisfaction when the mom gets in touch and says, "Hey, that really helped Maddie, and she's got a full scholarship now." At University of Maryland, and yeah, more power to her. So yeah, a lot of satisfaction when you break through like that and you help people out.
Yeah. Well, Mark, if you could let's say get a playing lesson from one of your golfing heroes, and let's take Orville Moody out of this one. But if you could, who would that be? If you could play golf with any of the touring pros or top teachers, doesn't matter, celebrities, politicians. God help you on the politicians. But the point is, if you could play with anybody like that and play around a golf with them, who would it be? And what would you kind
Well,
of hope to glean out of it?
from what I understand, Lee Trevino, he was an entertaining guy. And when I was young, I liked watching him and his battles with Jack Nicklaus. I understand he's a great teacher as well.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to play around with Lee Trevino. And he was he's a great shot maker. He's
Oh,
one of the
yeah.
great shot makers, and he also had great length. I'm still in my quote unquote retirement. I'm trying to be a better golfer. I'm trying to get a little more length. So Lee Trevino might be able to help me get it out there another 20 yards or so.
There you go. I will tell you a funny story about Lee Trevino. They used to do a thing called the Fred Meyer Challenge up here. It was Peter Jacobson's deal, and it was more of a they really called it Peter's Party. It was like 3 days of just a lot of fun.
Hmm.
But they always had a pro-am. A lot of the big leagues around the Portland area would pay a lot of money to play in the pro-am, and I was out there watching it one time, and here comes Trevino, and he's got these four guys with him. And I don't know if it was Lee or somebody hit a pretty decent wedge shot into, you know, right on the edge past the pin. And so there was let's say a 15-foot putt, something like that. All right. So
Hmm.
Lee grabs his putter. Three of the guys grab their putter. One poor soul grabs his wedge, and he goes up there. First guy putts, comes pretty close. Second guy putts, gets pretty close. Third guy grabs it, takes his wedge, and Trevino steps in front of him, and he goes, "What in the hell are you doing?" And it's loud, and it's in front of the crowd, and everybody's kind of snickering. And the guy said, "Well, I thought I would chip it," and he goes, "There's only one guy that can make that chip, and that's Raymond Floyd. And buddy, you ain't Raymond Floyd. Now go get your goddamn putter." I felt sorry for the guy, but the crowd was just howling. So,
Yeah.
uh,
I love that story. Yeah.
yeah, it
Uh,
was true Trevino stuff. Mark, we say a lot in these days about grow the game. We got to grow the game, and I think working in the native culture and links and stuff, and you've got great stories in your book talking about Noda and these different people helping kids. But do you think overall we're really doing a good job? And it's a loaded question, I get it. But do you think we're doing a good job of growing the game?
that's a great question. I'm one of 8 kids, born in Paterson, New Jersey. As I like to joke with the natives, they like this joke, by the way. I always say my tribe is Po White from New Jersey. Golf. My introduction to golf was my grandfather's sticks, which were too big for me, and we got to play on vacation up in the Adirondacks, for 1 week a year or so. When I look back, and I'm a volunteer at the First Tee now here in Boston. I look back on it, I'm like, I really wish we had First Tee and some of these programs that were getting kids gear. So I think there's some really positive developments over the last few years. The USGA has a pathways program now,
Right.
as does the PGA, where they're getting kids gear. First Tee is a really strong program as well. Now, that said, the kids need access to the courses, right, in order to really enjoy the game. I mean, if you just throw a kid onto a golf course, they're going to get frustrated. It's going to be easier to learn basketball or baseball or something like that. So I think you have to, balance out the difficulty of the game with the access to the courses, right?
Yeah.
As someone says in my book, or maybe it was at the First Tee program, Nota Begay and Tiger Woods didn't result in more black and brown golfers, right? That kind of, hero worship doesn't bring kids out in the way that we would like, right?
Right.
First Tee does. And
Right.
so I think we just need to continue to expand the resources available to young kids in urban environments, and the courses have to also do their part and say, hey, we're going to dedicate a day to having the kids come out and play for free and having access, that, so I think it's a really good question, Jeff. Are we doing enough? There's a lot of good stuff, a lot of good energy going on. I think everyone's heart's in the right place. But it's access to the courses, I think, that really is the hurdle.
We have, and I was just at a reception for it a couple weeks ago. We have a thing out here called the Jacobson Initiative, which again, Peter and his brother David, and I know his brother David pretty well. They've set up a deal through the Oregon Golf Association where it's like a, a pass. You sign up for it. And any kid that meets the requirements, which is simply an age requirement, there's 69 golf courses around the state of Oregon that subscribe to this program. The
Hmm.
kid can play a full round for $5
Right.
with this pass card.
Is
The
that the youth on course?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
then
yeah, yeah.
the the Jacobson Initiative folks, they pay the balance. They paid
Uh-huh.
almost, well, 120,000 rounds. So they paid the
Uh-huh.
$5 for the 20,000 rounds for last year and then some other stuff. So, it's just a great way for kids of limited means, and I don't care what their families have. Kids never seem to have more than $5 in their pocket, if that, anyway.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
golf is not cheap, as we know,
mhm.
even with special programs. So I think programs like that maybe could be modeled in other areas of the country, and I'm sure some areas are doing it. I'm not familiar with all of them, but
Yeah.
something like that I think helps a lot. And then there's usually on prescribed days somebody around there to maybe help them a little bit instruction wise or what have you. Anyway, that's just kind of what's going on
Well,
out here.
I'd say one more thing about that though is because COVID, spurred a surge in golf.
Right,
And I think the discussion now is among the PGA and USGA and some of the folks that I've worked with is like, how do we harness that energy and keep that going? Right.
right,
I think
right.
a lot of people took up golf just to be outside, but that translates into the young as well. A lot more young people out there. So we have to harness that and get them good gear. I mean, what I could have done with good gear when I was 11 or 12, when I was out there trying to swing a full size club, I went into soccer and I love soccer. I did really well at it. I coached at the college level. But again, I look back on my life. It's like, I wish I had been a better golfer. I
Yeah,
would have loved to
yeah,
be a good golfer in high school,
yeah. I found well, actually, coming home a few years ago from covering the LPGA tournament, the Portland Classic at the Columbia Edgewater, traffic was backed up, so I cut through kind of a industrial area, and there was a big Goodwill store there. But what I didn't know, it wasn't your actual
Hmm.
Goodwill store. It was kind of the end of the line Goodwill store where they ship
Hmm.
everything for one last shot, and after that it goes in the landfill, right? And Mark, there
Hmm.
were three different, very long, like 12-foot long and like a foot deep of these big metal table bins full of golf clubs. And
Hmm.
they were selling them for like 5 cents a pound. Okay.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I thought, and I've tried to tell people, if you can find one of those stores, and every major area has one that has Goodwills or something like that around there. You can
Yeah.
go get they're, no, they're not the top of the line Titleist, but to get started with, there's probably some good clubs you could put together out of that. So, and
Yeah.
for, $10 type thing. Anyway, one last question for you, Mark. What would be your last meal if you were on death row?
I gotta say, you have my mouth watering now after this conversation, and I know that you focus on barbecue. I'd have to say, Texas brisket,
Yeah.
would definitely be part of it. I'm out here in New England where we get some really nice scallops. So I'd want to go surf and turf, I think, and do a brisket with some pan fried scallops.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and again, my favorite thing, if I were 10 minutes to live, a bowl of cream spinach, would would send me to heaven happy, right?
There you
So
go. There you go. I make a pretty mean I created a dish called tequila scallops. So in my work. So yeah, maybe sometime we'll do that. Anyway, Mark Wagner, new book out, Native Links, The Surprising History of Our First People in Golf. I recommend it. It's a great read. It's done very well. And Mark, thank you for putting up with me today.
JT, really appreciate it. And yeah, hello to all your golfers out there. And as I said, on my tour through, we're definitely going to hook up for some golf out there on the native owned courses in Oregon. And you can take me to your favorite spot as well.
We will do that. All right, we're gonna get out of here. Everybody have a good week. Go out, play some golf, and most of all, be kind. Take care, everybody.